Model railroad clubs, do-it-yourself sound installation, or factory installed, and why aren't batteries in model railroads? We got a lot of questions today, and I'm going to try and answer them. Hey everybody, my name's Jimmy. Welcome to Coffee and Trains. Today I'm drinking Donut Shop Duos with the cinnamon roll flavor in it. It is really delicious. If you want to tell me what type of coffee you are drinking and maybe have it featured right here, you can put that in the comments below. Cheers, guys. Cinnamony. So, first of all, special Monday edition of Coffee and Trains. If you're watching this on the day it came out, I was a little under the weather last week. If you're watching this after it came out, then just completely ignore all that. Let's go ahead and get into our questions. So, Samuel Itza, he asked, he is looking at getting either a Kato SD70 Ace or the Atlas-8. Now, he wants to do a DIY installation for the DCC sound decoder for the SD70, but if he gets the Atlas one, he's going to get it with the factory sound installed. And he asked which one would be better. Now, it really comes down to what you want. First of all, I actually do have both of these locomotives, and I have the -8 with the factory installed. I got it on a sale, and I have the Kato SD70 Ace, which I just have a standard decoder in. And here is what I will say. I did initially buy a Kato SD70 and attempt to do the DIY sound install myself. It takes some reasonable tools to be able to do this without buying some very specific parts, and I ended up actually shearing the whole chassis in half and having to buy a replacement chassis from Kato to send to me. So my thing is going to be, if you're really looking at sound, I would look at either getting the Atlas-8 with the factory installed. If you really want Kato, you can usually buy the SD70 or any of those with sound install. They're just pretty expensive. So it really comes down to which brand you want. If you want the Kato, let's say you have a bunch of Katos and it's just going to be somehow easier to speed match, that'd be great. But I do have both of these locomotives on my layout, and I love them both dearly. They're both great runners. So it really comes down to, do you just want to go have sound in it, or do you just want to put a decoder in it and try to do sound yourself? So that is my take on the whole thing. I be deplorable. It's a clever little name right there. Ask about why batteries have not been adopted more in model railroading. Well, I really think it comes down to space and electronics. Batteries are going to require a bit more of electronic space than what you have now, and that may not be as much of an issue in HO scale, where the decoders are a bit more standardized and they just have a certain plug that you use, whereas in scale you have more custom-sized decoders. You're starting to get a little bit more standardization with things like Next 18 and things like that. But really, if you look at, for instance, if you look at Kato, you have custom decoders for Katos that are drop-in specifically for Kato locomotives and won't work on anything else without a lot of modification. So, and you don't have a lot of space for batteries that can hold a meaningful amount of charge. So, and in scale, I think it's going to be a while, if ever, we get to where batteries are used, because the system with power is, the bottom line is, it's pretty reliable, and they've gotten it pretty reliable with keep alives and things like that. So maybe it gets into HO scale a little more, where you have some space for those batteries, but really right now we have a system that works and they're continuing to innovate on the system. I really think that what you're going to go more towards is that just there's power supplied and you're going to be able to send the signal directly to the locomotive. So it's going to be more of like what we had with Blue Nami, the decoder that I reviewed from Soundtracks a few weeks ago, or a month ago now, that's a little while ago. And what you have is basically you're going to have track coming from the power, and then you'll just be able to connect directly to the locomotives. Now, this would also open up potential for battery conversions, because it's going to make it a lot easier to do that. But right now, I think that's the direction we're headed, where you're going to be talking directly to locomotives, directly from your controller to the locomotive, rather than going through a base station and then through a DCC system. I think that's probably the next direction that it's going before we get really into the battery system. I'm going to butcher this name, and I am so terribly sorry. Katstub Ponchki asked if you can use a 15-volt 5-amp power supply for a DCC++ motor shield. It's not going to instantly burst into flames, but I really would probably stick around the 12 volts, and I would definitely make sure that if you're going to use anything around that voltage, that you're cutting the trace that prevents the motor shield from supplying power to the Arduino, because you will blow your Arduino and fry it. And 5 amps, there's only so much that those motor drivers can output, and you're just going to be wasting. Now, I do have a 12 volt 5 amp power supply connected to my motor shield, but Really, I would stick around 12 volts. Yes, the motor shield can handle more, but I would stick around 12 volts, and then I would also just no more than 5 amps. So really, I would not use a 15 volt 5 amp on a DCC++ setup. SCGo says he's trying to get the throttle working on a JMRI programming track. He's using a Kato with ESU Low-Sound 5. Now, if you're using DCC++, which is the only programming tracks that I've ever used, because when I got back into the hobby, DCC++ was going strong, and I just built my programming tracks out of those. So when you do that, I've never been able to get a locomotive to move with DCC++ and JMRI with those two together. Now, I know with other things, you can move the locomotive with no problem, but if you're using DCC++, I've never been able to get it to move. If I am wrong, someone please tell me, because I've never been able to get it to work right. Ed Miller says he's trying to do 5 to 10 LED lights, and he says, should I do a series or parallel connection? It really depends on what you're doing. I'm always a fan of doing the bus and then have everything out, so just have one wire go to the bus, and then each light gets its own wire from that bus rather than stringing them along. But it really depends on what you're doing. It also depends on how much resistance you're needing. If you're doing them in parallel, you're definitely going to need more resistors because you're doing those connections. If you're doing them in series, each LED essentially acts as a resistor and draws down the wattage. But that's a whole other video, and I actually did that in another Coffee and Trains a little while back, and I'll link that at the end. But I would say connect them all to a bus. So run everything to the power right there, and then just have the bus, and then everything connects back to the bus. That's the best way that I typically do it. Phil Hamster asks, am I a member of a model railroad club? Well, frankly, I would like to be. The issue is right now is that I am a father of 2 3-year-old twins. I have a full-time job that I have quite a commute with, and I run this YouTube channel. I do all sorts of things. So I would love to be part of a model railroad club, but the bottom line is I do not have the time to meaningfully contribute to a club, and I don't think that that would be necessarily fair to them if I became a member and then just wasn't there. So if I get a little bit more time, or maybe when my kids get a little bit older and they want to get more involved in the hobby, they already are like busting down the doors to get in here, so I know that they're going to want to be in here. Maybe I'll join a club so that we can all go out to different places, and I can have, some more, maybe if they have a big HO scale layout, I can have more HO scale stuff to run at the club or things like that, and then just bring in more insight and stuff like that. But right now, I am not a member of a club. If you have a question you would like to ask and have me answer in next month's Q&A, you can leave that in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Stay safe, be kind, drink some coffee, and happy railroading.